Welcome, Blind Eye friends. We are on another section of The Wounded Heart. Last time we read 65 to 71, and that was part 2B. So today, as my faithful leaf tells me, we're going to be on page 73, and it is chapter 3. So part 3, chapter 3, page 73, 333. And the title of this chapter is Deflection, the Clash with Content. Okay, so here we go. By Dr. Dan B. Allender, forward by Dr. Larry Crabb. The SA person is in a war. The enemy is ultimately the evil one, and the path of loyalty to Satan's vision, rebellion, autonomy, or in other words, sin. The dilemma is that Satan is crafty, and his path is often subtle. All sin is felt to be reasonable and justifiable, given the situation, and rarely experienced as malicious or God-dishonoring in its intention. The unkind word or the forgetful lapse of sensitivity appear to be either a minimal offense, given what we may be capable of, or actually acceptable if one were to see the world from our vantage point. Even the more severe expressions of sin, adultery, dishonesty, slander, or greed seem less heinous when their context is brought into perspective. An affair may be wrong, but if you only knew how unhappy I am or what kind of marriage I've endured, then I may be vindicated, but at least I'd be understood and eventually forgiven. Sin, in fact, seems like the most reasonable, rational, common sense response to a fallen, frightening, and potentially dangerous world. God's perspective and path, at least at first, and often for the duration, seem entirely absurd. The call to give up life in order to find it, the promise that the poor in spirit will be blessed, turn our world upside down and violate our natural, though fallen understanding. If sin is subtle and appears eminently reasonable, and godliness is paradoxical and seems absurdly impractical, then it stands to reason that what we consider to be normal may in fact be insanity. And what we consider to be acceptable or even godly may be prideful arrogance. Page 74. And rebellion against the Creator. The categories we consider sin in many cases exclude other elements that equally embody the commitment to find life apart from relationship with God. The commitment involves subtle and noxious interplay of shame and contempt. What is contempt? Contempt is the best understood in its operation. Consider how you handle the loss of your car keys or cope with forgetting an important date. What are the words that you utter when you realize you've done something stupid or silly? A friend of mine describes those events as self-bashing opportunities. How could you have been so stupid, you fool? Why don't you keep better control of your schedule, you idiot? Okay, for the record, I probably said this like 1,000 times in my videos on my main channel, that I didn't want my kids to ever call people stupid or idiots or dumb, because I just find it really hurtful, and there's no reason to do that. So it's funny reading it in books to me, because I'm I tried so hard to not say those things. I actively make sure I never call my husband stupid or an idiot or anything like that, just because I think it's just so unnecessary. It just does a lot of damage to me, because I was called that a lot, just all of those, you're dumb, you're stupid, you're an idiot, and it was very hurtful to me. So just side note, that's one of those things. I was raised in an IFB church, so my mom was really strict on language. We couldn't say any kind of swear words. We couldn't say crap, or we couldn't say fart, or we couldn't say all these things, so I did carry that into adulthood, and I'm totally fine with that. Still maintaining just good linguistics, if you will, good proper speaking, and not insulting, not using a lot of bad words or foul language. I'm obviously, when I'm with adults, I can say whatever, sailor style language, but it's just a side note of some things we learned in church wasn't such a bad thing, and just not calling people mean names was one of those things I just carried with me, I guess. I don't know. Take that for what you will. Why don't you keep better control of your schedule, you idiot? Few would consider the internal dialogue as a problem or a sign of arrogant sin. At worst, it would be seen as a result of poor self-image. Is there a possibility of something more pernicious? I don't know how to say that word. I'm like, what? Pernicious in this self-bashing? Or consider what our internal response often is to negative feedback. We may say, "Thank you for your thoughts. I will seriously consider your feedback as we work on the project," while internally challenging the messenger. How arrogant! How can you presume to critique our approach when you're not even an expert in your own field? The feedback is not considered because the character or competence of the messenger is scrutinized under the microscope of condemnation. Both the reaction to the loss of your keys and the critical thoughts regarding a colleague involve the use of contempt to diminish the potential for shame. So basically, we got attitude, and it helps us not feel bad because we are contemptuous about it. Okay. Legitimate shame has the power to expose sin. It pierces the seemingly impenetrable masquerade of idolatry and cuts open the heart to reveal a person's basis for life and hope. But the light is often found to be too bright and disturbing. Therefore, fallen man quickly resorts to a shield that seems to deflect the intrusion of God. The power of contempt. Contempt is absurd in that it inevitably increases man's vulnerability, while it enables him to regain a semblance of control that protects him against dependence on God. Contempt is a major weapon against the humbling work of God. To understand the effects of living in a fallen world in general, or the damage of SA in particular, a thorough understanding of contempt is required. Contempt is condemnation, an attack against the perceived cause of the shame. The attack is laced with hatred, venom, and icy cruelty, though it can be as insidious as a warm smile and gentle rebuke. The condemnation can be against the person whose eyes are penetrating our facade, or against the element of our being that is the cause of the shameful revelation. Shame is a phenomenon of the eyes. The eyes usually drop and the shoulders slump when one feels shame. More than anything in the world, the shamed person wants to be invisible or small so that the focus will be removed. The hemorrhage of the soul stopped. The hemorrhage of the soul stopped. How can the shame person accomplish this? How somehow the eyes of the one who sees him must be deflected or destroyed. And there are two options. The shame person can turn his eyes away from the penetrating gaze and focus on the element in his own being that is the cause of the shame, or he can attack his enemy's eyes directly with the poison of his hatred, blinding those eyes so their power is nullified. The first option, self-contempt, and the second, other-centered contempt, though different in form, are similar in function. Both the form and function of contempt have profound implications for those who have been SA'd. The forms of contempt. Contempt is poorly understood. At best, self-contempt is associated with a poor self-image, and other-centered contempt is seen as haughty disregard for another. That perception may be accurate, but it is woefully incomplete. Contempt in either orientation comes in many different forms. It is best to think of the possible variations of contempt in a continuum from very severe to least severe. And it has a little diagram, if you will. You probably can't see it from there, but little thing with the arrow going. It says severe or very severe, physically destructive; moderately severe, personally destructive; mildly severe, critically critically evaluative, least severe, least severe, relationally uncomfortable. Okay. Very severe contempt. And then I'm guessing it's going to go into detail of all these different categories. Very severe contempt. A woman who was abused by a babysitter over several years began to consult me regarding her SA. She had worked with a number of counselors before, so work progressed quickly and she made significant progress in dealing with her life. As we began to address her relationship with men, however, she became seized with terror. Our work was painful but productive. In one significant session, we discussed a number of events that revealed an enormous hatred. We are now going on page 76. I'm gonna drink real quick. Wet my whistle, if you will. Pardon me. Of her longing for an intimate relationship with a man. She had gone to awful lengths to undermine her beauty of body and soul. As I listened and reflected with her, I was overwhelmed by the sadness of her hatred, and I wept. She was overcome with terror. A look of overwhelming fear covered her face, and I was confused. She was unable to put words to her experience, and the hour ended. The following session, she reported an intense desire to do physical harm to herself after our last visit. She had left my office and driven home at frightening speeds. She later took a walk in a section of town that is known as R-Word Alley. She slept little, ate poorly, and drove herself unmercifully at work. She was tempted to pick her fingernails, scratch her skin until she bled, and resume past patterns of bulimia. She also dreamt of my death in a violent car accident. Needless to say, it was not one of the best weeks of her life. She was flooded with extreme self and other-centered contempt. Very severe contempt is seen in a desire to do physical harm to oneself or another. It is the desire to destroy, or at least damage through wanton disregard. Through wanton disregard. Or at least do damage through wanton disregard. The physical needs and limits of the human frame. It may be blatant, like unaliving, or subtle, like binging on junk food. In either case, the body is punished for existing and wanting. In other cases, there is a desire to actively or passively destroy the person who has provoked the hunger of the soul. Moderately severe contempt. A conservatively dressed woman, meek in disposition, with a Sunday school demeanor. What? A Sunday school demeanor? That's funny. Told me of her fantasy to be physically beaten and awed by a gang of ruthless men. That would be really hard to admit to. Like, let's be honest. Like, you're just like, hey, this is like what I fantasize about. Like, that would be a lot to say out loud. And like, do they have permission to like write these stories in these books? Like, I always wonder that when it's like a counselor, a therapist, or even a pastor who hears all these stories, like, do they get individual permission to like talk about these people? I know they're not like necessarily being named, I don't think, but it's still creepy and sorry. Like, my bathroom light came on all by itself, and it's scary every time, even though it just randomly does it. It's on like a motion sensor, and like there's no motion, and it turns on, and it's so creepy. So anyway, side note, did they get permission to tell all these stories? Because like, it's embarrassing. Anywho, the replay of the violent fantasy during Schminterschmors was the only means by which she could achieve the big O with her husband. The same woman would occasionally fantasize hanging a faceless man from a tree by his parts or verbally humiliating a man for some minimal offense. I'm sorry, I don't know, this is like so, I almost drooled. So, funny to me. I don't know why. Sorry, it's serious. Get with it. The essence of her fantasy was degrading and abuse. Violent thoughts, words, or images are like a slashing knife that bleeds the soul of life. The the titillation the titillation found in violent images serves as an anesthetic that dulls the ravages of overwhelming loss. Moderately severe contempt can also be seen in elaborate fantasies of revenge. The frustrated employee who dreams of finding some way to vindicate his worth to the company by saving millions of dollars that his idiotic boss would have lost due to negligence and incompetence is utilizing other-centered contempt to regain faith and control. By the way, I am not trying to be like unprofessional. I am not a therapist. I am not a counselor. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not any of like the professionally whatevers. Like I don't claim to be. I am just like a regular human and a victim of different kinds of abuse. And so like I'm just reading this as a human. So like forgive me if I don't handle all the things in these books like perfectly, because I'm not perfect. And I'm not like trying to make fun of victims in any way. We all heal differently and we all have different things going on in our heads that we probably wouldn't say out loud. And I guess that's why it's like catching me off guard. Like hearing like people's like real thoughts in a counseling session, it's just like, because you know, we've all had our weird thoughts and feelings, especially being victims or just being like a regular person. Like we all got our things that we think about that's weird or different or maybe a little embarrassing, and you only tell like certain people, like your sister or your best friend or your spouse. And sometimes even then, like a lot of people don't want to tell their spouses like what they really think about. So yeah. My coping mechanism is laughter and jokes. So like don't take everything too seriously, okay? It's okay to laugh about stuff. Getting over this cough's taking forever. Mildly severe contempt. Mildly severe contempt is probably the most common and easy to recognize. Therefore, it often operates without being seen as contemptuous. It involves a comparative evolution of oneself or another, which the loser of the analysis is rebuked or angrily exhorted to perform more adequately. Imagine your response as a teenager to a new crop of skin blemishes, or as an adult to spilling a drink in your lap. The acrimonious inner dialogue may be severe, the names used unsightly, but the result often appears to be greater energy to make a change. Yeah, I get mad at myself a lot when I hate, like, I hate when because normally I'm supposed to wear glasses, and I don't like wearing them in videos, because then, like, the ring lights are in the reflection, and I hate people's reflections in their glasses in videos, so I'm like, I will be blind. And so far, like, reading is not terrible while I'm, having no glasses. It's more like seeing, like, while I'm driving, I shouldn't drive without glasses. It's like the far away stuff that is really bad to try to read. But, I hate when I'm wearing glasses and I bump my head into stuff, and that is when I like curse out myself a lot, because like I feel so dumb. Like I don't know my width, you know, where I'm walking through a door and don't realize like my hips should have turned, or like I'm way wider than I thought I was, you know, and I'm just like ow, and like stubbing my toe. Like I'm really mad at myself. So I have a lot of contempt when I hurt myself on accident, and it like shouldn't have happened. Like I shouldn't have banged my head on a cupboard, because like I should have known the distance, you know, like I should have been able to gauge that, but no. It involves comparative evaluation of oneself or another, in which the loser of the analysis is rebuked or angrily exhorted to perform more adequately. Imagine your response as a teenager to a new crop of skin blemishes. I already read that part. Fast forward. Tennis without hanging himself on his performance. He analyzes and critiques every shot as he works himself into a frenzy of desire. He claims his play improves as he maligns his performance. He feels energized to play better so that he won't suffer the bitter sting of his own flagellations. In a similar way, the Christian community often encourages self-contempt as a means of increasing holiness. For instance, if you chastise yourself harshly enough or for doing the M word, then you will be less likely to engage in that activity with impunity. Other-centered contempt is evident whenever fault is found with another and the motivation is not love. It is used to diminish some inner struggle that is almost invariably linked to a sense of being exposed as inadequate or undesirable. Quiet or public condemnation of another keeps them in place that is manageable and secure and diminishes whatever threat they may pose. The SA woman often finds ample opportunity to destroy her enjoyment of being a woman through negative evaluations of her face, body, clothing, or manner of relating, especially in light of comparisons to other women. An attractive woman may harbor deep hatred for her own body and still be critically evaluating the beauty of rivals. Yeah, pretty women, it's hard for other pretty women. Least severe contempt. A friend of mine could not receive a compliment even if her life depended on it. She cannot bear the relational intensity she feels when someone enjoys her. If you enjoyed her cooking, she would decree her inadequate preparation. If you were to thank her for her friendship, she would confess to being a poor servant. If you were to point out her unwillingness to receive a compliment, she would feel awful for hours. It is difficult to enjoy giving a person who undermines her own beauty, kindness, and abilities because she is always faster than the eye in pulling the rug out from under your compliment. She may appear to be humble. There is, however, a profound arrogance in never receiving the gift of another's kindness. At times, the discomfort in receiving a compliment is due to a keen sense of unworthiness, self-contempt, or doubt about the sincerity of the kind word, other-centered contempt. So I feel this, and like a lot of what's in this book I can relate to, but I am usually if someone's like, oh, your house looks so pretty, I'll be like, yeah, except for that corner over there. Do you see that huge mess? I know it's there. Like, don't pay attention to that. But I'm like pointing it out and then they pay attention to it. And I'm like really bad at that. And if someone's like, oh, you're pretty, I'm like, are you serious? Like, what about XYZ? That's wrong with me. And so I totally get this. I'm not as critical about other people. I guess if they like insult me or something, then I'll be like, oh my god, well, she's ugly. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I'm not really kidding, but yeah, sort of. I should be kidding. Okay, I got this new chair. I got two chairs, like one for each girl, but like one didn't like this with no arms because she like does art and likes the armrest. So I was like, okay, I'll try it out. It's a crisscross chair and I do like it. It's nice and wide. And I got a pink one that I also think is so cute for my other daughter, but it's in my little corner right now because she wants to like sit with me and like play Office and stuff like that. So anyways, just so you know, like I have a different chair, so I'm like, oh no, I need to tell the audience that I have a different chair, even though it doesn't matter and you don't care, I'm sure, but like normally I have a different chair over here. Anyways, okay, back to it. So, other-centered contempt. The attitude projected in either case is that she will not be touched by the other's movement toward her, nor will she allow the other to enjoy the reciprocal interplay of giver and receiver enjoying each other's pleasure. For a person who fears that deepening spiral of relational enjoyment, any intimacy must be headed off before it intensifies. The SA person often carries contempt as an antidote to the bite of pleasure. The first stirring of aliveness or passion in contempt. The first stirring of aliveness or passion in Contact with another feels like a venom that may take both parties into a destructive spiral of lust or revenge. A woman informed me, "You don't know what I might do if I were to think that someone really liked me. I'm so afraid that I would do something, including something immoral, to keep their approval. It's better for us both if I ignore or doubt your warmth." Contempt in any form operates for a purpose, almost always to protect the user from damaging others or replicating the past abuse that wounded her soul. A more detailed look at the function of contempt will help explain its usefulness to the victim of SA. The functions of contempt. Most of us feel confused by what we do. Some things come out of our mouths without much thought. Why did I mock my wife's new bohemian outfit? Why? Because it seems silly and I don't really know. For that matter, who cares? What difference does it make that I know the purpose behind my remark? The answer is complex. To know the why opens a door to the possibility of seeing the enormity of the problem and the need for something more than mere behavioral alteration. At best, awareness of the motivation behind behavior reveals the web of our fallen desire and creates a desperate need for God's intervention to rescue us from such a dark maze. Insight alone does not provide the impetus to change destructive behavior. It only creates a context for more fervent repentance. At its worst, an understanding of motivation may lead to fascinating intrigue, self-absorptive introspection, and a focus away from issues of sin, salvation, and sanctification. The solution, of course, resides in the heart of the explorer, the person who plaintively cries out from her core, Lord, see if there be any secret, harmful way in me. Will eventually be blessed with a picture of her sin and God's nurturing provision of grace. The one who explores human motivation out of an ultimate desire to explain away the horror of sin or the profound need for a savior will pleasantly ruminate about motivation without conviction or change. It is my desire to explain the function of contempt in a way that leads to clarity about sin and path to change. Why would anyone use contempt? In simple terms, the motivation involved in contempt is similar to Adam's attack on God, deflection of the eyes of the Creator. If we can avoid his look, then perhaps we will be able to flee from the consequence of our sin. Contempt serves us in at least 4 ways. It diminishes our shame, it deadens our longings, it makes us feel in control, and it distorts the real problem. Diminishes shame. Contempt either blinds the eyes of the observer, other-centered contempt, or turns the eyes of the one shamed away from the one who has observed self-contempt. In either case, the effect is the same. The intense experience of shame has been diminished. Both forms of contempt may be used alternately, attacking self and then attacking the other, though in most cases, an individual will be more comfortable and predisposed to utilize one style of contempt more consistently than the other. Shame always includes an aspect of anxiety. What will happen when I am found out? Will I be abandoned or mocked? Behavioral psychologists discovered that relaxation, arousal, and anger are incompatible with anxiety. Interesting. Excuse my washer telling me it's time to change the load. It's a long song. Okay. It is not possible to simultaneously feel both the gnawing uncertainty of anxiety and the pulsating energy of rage. one will win out. In most cases, rage will prevail. So it is the case of contempt. Contempt uses rage, sometimes loud and violent, and other times quiet and insidious, as a means of chasing away an uncertainty of shame. As long as contempt is present, shame will not stop a person in her tracks, but will energize action and movement away from the dreaded exposure. Deadens longings. Deadens longings. What? I don't know what deadens is, but okay. Also, I think it's kind of wrong that like anxiety and rage or whatever can't be together, because I feel like when I have anxiety and I'm like really anxious about something or scared, I get mad. Because like I'd always say that like when I was scared of my ex, I couldn't be as good of a mom as I wanted to be when I was so scared. And it affected me, like, because I was scared, and then I'd get like upset, and then easily triggered or like easily like jumpy, so it's like, oh, I feel like they go together, or one comes before the other. So if you're like anxious and scared, it can make you mad. Or like think of like you almost get hit by a car accident, like, or by like a car, and then you're like, ah, like I don't know. So I'm a little iffy on that little advice that they gave. But okay, so this is page 79, the end of page 79. Deadens longings. In the midst of shame, longing for what the heart craves intensifies the anguish of the soul. Most of us, therefore, are committed to avoid, or, if possible, to destroy whatever increases sorrow in our unpredictable and dangerous world. For the women or men who has been aid, one of the greatest enemies of the soul is the longing for intimacy. To feel alive, passionate, and hungry of heart for what God made man for, invites the memory of past A to stir again. The past A, which is Bruce, in case you don't know the abbreviations, man for past abuse, drowned in a sea of denial or ever present as a living nightmare, threatens to overwhelm the victim if she relaxes her vigil and lets down her defenses. To feel good in relationship with another, like no other experience, opens the door to past horror and future terror. I've worked with a number of single women who've been aid. In the midst of significant personal change, a softening and freeing of their souls occurs that increases their beauty of body and soul. Several have had dating relationships turn more serious at this point. The potential realization of a hidden desire to be married often triggers a return to the memories of the past A, an exacerbation of the presenting problem, and a strong ambivalence about the future. On the one hand, wanting the relationship to work, and on the other, sabotaging the outcome. Proverbs 12:12 says, "Hope deferred, lost, makes the heart sick." The abused person has lost hope in many cases, is leery about regaining a rich desire for intimacy or justice. It seems so convoluted. The person who might offer hope and life is viewed as an enemy. The one who ignores, uses, or harms is embraced as a lost friend and lover. Many women who have been abused end up in tragic relationships which they are re-victimized. One factor involved in that choice is the unconscious commitment to find people who will guarantee loss, so that hope is never deeply stirred. Contempt is a cruel anesthetic to longing. As long as I turn my condemnation against myself, I block the potential for your movement toward me and my longing for you to care. I'll feel that. When I turn my condemnation against you, I am free from believing that I want anything from you. In either case, contempt kills longing, provides the illusion of control. Fallen man works tenaciously at times to psychotic lengths to gain magical control over life by generating reasons that explain the why and what for of that which seems beyond his understanding. Have you ever noticed the penchant to explain God when difficult events occur in your life, in our life? There is an overwhelming desire to find the reason for the suffering. I mean, yes. There may be a perspective that will comfort and instruct, but many are unwilling to accept the uncontrollable and mysterious until they've found an explanation that makes sense. Okay, so comfort and instruct, but many are unwilling to accept the uncontrollable and mysterious until they've found an explanation to make sense. This is particularly the case when the struggle involves deep personal loss. Why am I not married? Why did my husband leave me? Why did my father abuse me? Questions about human suffering tear the soul away from the pleasant pretense of fairness. Is life just? Is life just? Is it fair? Or does inequity and inequality expose the well-manicured yards of our lives to reveal the sordid underbrush and squalid weeds of the fall? For many, the raw reality of life in a fallen world is too much to endure. Therefore, more acceptable, more controllable explanations must be found. Contempt provides a strange antidote for the struggle of confusion, terror, and helplessness. Consider the usefulness of self-contempt in dealing with the past of S.A. One woman told me that as a 15-year-old, she was apparently too sexy for her father to resist. Gross. I feel that, and that's so sad. She excuses his heinous sin by blaming herself. As long as she was at fault, she did not have to face her sorrow. Perhaps even more, the explanation gave her a means of organizing and controlling her life. If she was aid because she was too sexy, all she needed to do was hide that part of her body or spirit that men fight that might all she needed to do is hide any part of her or spirit that men might find appealing. Her dress was modest to a fault. Her demeanor was boring to tears. Her contempt provided her an explanation for the past harm and a plan for living more safely in the world. Another client lived out her self-contempt quite differently. She saw herself as a cheap, stained, seductive woman who loved to entrap helpless men. Her self-contempt was used as a weapon to violate the men who hopelessly fell to her charms. Her thrill was to entice and then frustrate her victim until he reached a point of either whimpering or lashing out in rage. A number of times she was beaten or arred by her victims. In this example, we can see the frightening inner working of both kinds of contempt. She had a contemptuous plan for living that gave her a false sense of control over her longings. I am a whore. I don't like saying that word. Because I was called that a lot too, because of my abuse, and someone really destroyed my whole self-esteem because of being abused. And so, like, he's the reason I don't want to call people, like, stupid or dumb or idiot or whore or C words or, like, whatever. Like, I was, like, traumatized into having my children speak better so that we could, like, have a better life for them, I guess. And then that way they could look for people that treated them better than I was treated, if that makes sense. So why should I long for a clean relationship with anyone? I am a conqueror who will make you pay if you want to use me. The role of contempt is no different for a man. A male client told me how he was often actually accosted by other boys as he came home from school. He learned to tolerate their roaming hands and the way they degraded him by making jokes about his prowess and the size of his stuff down there, his parts. He continued to mock himself in the same way throughout his adulthood. He expressed his other-centered contempt by never approaching his wife for S involvement. Page 82. He always made her approach him. His seeming lack of interest was a deep wound to his wife. He explained his self-contemptuous joking as a safety valve that released pent-up anguish and rage that he could not face directly. This pattern of explanation and control is found in less extreme situations as well. If I blame my looks for my being single, then I not only have an explanation for why I am alone, but I can also have the illusion of doing away with doing away with my deficit by buying better clothes or working on my weight. As long as I believe there is something I can do about my problem, then I am not constrained to feel hopeless. A contemptuous explanation provides a direction to pursue to regain control over my emptiness, distorts the real problem. Contempt distorts the fact that the central human problem is sin. Other-centered contempt is the easiest to comprehend. It ignores one's own depravity and centers the blame on another person's failure. The classic paradigm is Adam's shifting of contemptuous blame on God and then on Eve. It was their fault, their responsibility. If they had only done their jobs better, Adam would never have been in that mess. Those who are good at other-centered contempt are perceived and usually accurate in their analysis of wrong. God had certainly made the woman, and Eve had clearly given Adam the fruit. The issue was not whether Adam was accurate in his analysis, but whether he was willing to accept the consequences of his rebellion. Other-centered contempt involves analysis for the aim of exploitation, feedback for the purpose of control. Self-contempt, though no less distorting, is more subtle in its effect. Contempt can be called the great masquerade. Self-contempt in particular is Satan's counterfeit for conviction over sin. When I feel bad about myself, angry that I said something insensitive to my wife, it can look like sorrow over sin. In actuality, it is usually a denigration of some element of my dignity rather than a sorrow over my depravity. A client told me about a fight with his wife. She vehemently attacked him for being uninvolved. Her words were full of bitterness and rage. I asked him what he said to her, and he told me that he put his head down on the pillow and wept. He felt overwhelmed. He hated himself for being so unloving and uninvolved. At one level, that sounds biblical and repentant. However, he was blaming himself for being a poor communicator, unable to really listen to his wife's pain. He saw his problem as a failure of concentration, communication skills, and empathy. Those deficiencies do not get to the heart of his radical selfishness that protected him from responding to her rage. His contempt did not bring about sorrow unto life. Instead, his pain was consistent with what Paul called sorrow unto death, a death due to self-absorbed self-protection. His deep sense of failure, sorry, this chair keeps making a noise. His deep sense of failure did not touch his wife, nor give him the energy to move toward her. In fact, his contempt simply turned his eyes away from her, dulled his pain, explained why the marriage was so bad, and offered him a strategy to be nicer, but not more involved with his wife. If he were under conviction of sin, he would have admitted to himself what a wretched woman he was, faced the ungodliness of his withdrawal, and moved toward her with sorrow, passion, and love. I am not sure what it would have meant for him to have loved her at that point. It might have involved willingness to enter into battle or hear out her complaint. But in either case, conviction would have freed him to move toward her with an energy that was other-focused and preserving. Contempt is complex and often hard to see. It sometimes masquerades as conviction. Other times, it seems like righteous indignation. At one point, it appears as a poor self-image and at another as a bad attitude toward others. Whatever its form or function, one thing can be assumed: contempt hinders the work of God. It directs our sight away from our deepest longings and deflects the focus from our depravity and need for a Savior to an attack against our own or others' dignity. The struggle with shame and contempt, a common experience for everyone, is an intensely felt battle for the man or woman who has been SA'd. There are many reasons for the significant struggle. The primary factor has to do with what is triggered in the human soul when a deep route to intimacy, whether physical contact or psychological interaction, is used to ensnare and enslave the young heart of the victim in a polluted or perverse relationship. We turn next to what happens to the human soul when A occurs. Okay, we will end it here. We read from page 73 to 83. And so that ends part 3. And we'll just call it part 3 with no A, B's, or C's because we read the whole chapter 3. So yeah, part 3 is done. Next, we will do part 4. Let me get my faithful leaf. So yeah, I tried to just get more reading done that time, a little less commentary. But that's pretty much what I have time for right now. Oopsies, just turned on my computer. Hopefully everyone enjoyed. Sorry it's a little choppy and I mess up my words a lot, and I know that, and forgive me. I try to edit out the mistakes, but yeah, I know I'm really bad at reading, so I'm sorry if it's like really hard to hear, but I do just personally like really want to grow with everybody and heal with everybody. And you know, not everybody has time to read, and I don't always have time to read either, but I'm just really trying to be intentional and hoping that you guys can do it along with me, because hopefully it'll motivate me to actually read all this. And yeah, I'm excited for the future, and hopefully everyone is intentionally living and intentionally healing and just trying to discover parts of themselves that maybe they didn't think about. And hopefully this will give you some deep thoughts to just kind of stew about, but in a good way. And it's given me a lot of thoughts, and I usually resonate with a lot of things that are in this book. So yeah, anyways, I will see you all later in the next reading. Bye. Part of the Explorer. Dora, 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 the Explorer.
Vehemently attracted him for being uninvolved, or attracted him. Everything with it.
The first stern.
So I'm my.
Hello.
Please hold.
Why am I even doing this?
Pernicious. Let's get into it.
Got those sniffs.
Okay. So have a great day, guys. I will see you next time.